I am Kevin Indig, and this is SEO in 2025.
Kevin, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My number one SEO tip for 2025 is to automate. And automation breaks down into three different components. One is mining insights, for example, from forums, SERP features, or the content ranking best. The second component is to create or use AI to create drafts of content. There's a lot of time that can be saved in that area. And number three is to enhance content programmatically, especially if you're a marketplace or an aggregator, like a TripAdvisor or Uber Eats, then there's a lot that you can do at scale with programmatic content enhancements.
Wonderful. There's nothing like a step-to-step structured approach that makes it easy to have a nice conversation about. So let's start off with number one. So mining insights from forums, you said.
Yes. Luckily, these days we have the tools to automate insight or information mining. So what that means specifically is we can, for example, use tools to get insights from Reddit, right? Reddit has gotten a lot of visibility in the search results lately, and they're tools that you can use to mine what the top trending posts are for a specific topic, what the best comments or answers are. And we can use that, for example, to inform new content creation or better understand what our target audience is talking about. Same thing for SERP features, right? Most rank trackers these days allow you to understand what augmentations Google is showing in the search results for your keywords, and then systematically optimize for them. For example, by including more images or having higher quality images on your site, or creating videos for your content, or maybe by deprioritizing search results that show a lot of SERP features at the top so that you avoid cases where you rank well, but get very little clicks for your rank.
I guess the challenge is that there's so much content out there. So how do you know precisely what to mine for?
Yeah, it's a great question. It starts with a good understanding of your audience, right? So I think 2025 is also the year that we finally get back to talking to customers, which we haven't done in marketing for a long time, understanding what's on their minds in terms of problems, concerns about the product, etc., and then turning that into a prompt that helps us sort through insights on forums like Reddit, Quora, but also many others to then understand what the more detailed conversations look like. And then again, bringing that back to our own content creation or copy on our landing page, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so bringing it back to your own content creation, are there any steps that you take after discovering the content to decide upon exactly the specific aspect of the content that you want to type about, that you want to create content about, and then how do you go about actually targeting maybe the keyword phrases and building out the content from there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So first, and this was kind of the second component I mentioned, I actually like to use AI to create drafts of content. I don't think that AI is in a place where it should write the complete article without revision or supervision, but to get from 0 to maybe 80% is perfectly possible with AI. And of course, there's a difference between the type of content you create. If, for example, we're talking about an opinion or thought leadership piece, AI is probably not very useful. Whereas if we're talking about something more evergreen, more search oriented, then AI is incredibly valuable. So there's this efficiency gain from creating drafts, but then there's also this research that you want to do where you look at, okay, what are all the different things that concern my target audience right now or that are top of mind, which again goes back to actually talking to them, seeing what's trending on forums, and then distilling that into a plan where you have different types of content, which is what you asked about. So you have the things that are, again, more search and keyword oriented, but then there are also maybe other pieces of content that are less optimized for search, but more optimized for engagement and positioning, right? So if, for example, the CEO writes an article about the future they see in that industry, or sharing maybe some of their unique experiences with customers and the product, these can be incredibly powerful, helping users accelerate their journey towards conversion, but they're not necessarily search oriented. However, I think in 2025, it's incredibly important to cover all these different types of content, but not from a principled perspective and much more from an insights driven perspective. So do I actually have evidence? Do I have data that the audience actually wants some opinion or a stance on a topic that's top of mind, for example?
I was going to ask you how you prioritize the content that needs to be written about, but then you started talking about data there as well. So do you take your first party data and then combine that with, I guess, what you find online to make some kind of decision about what to write about?
Correct. Yes. You could, in first party data can come very quantitatively. I mean, it could be traffic, engagement, conversions, surveys, polls, but it can also be things like conversations with your target audience, which often happens in almost every organization. I mean, every company, but often not in the marketing organization, often more in the product organization. But anyway, yes, you can combine these qualitative and quantitative insights with some of the data mining that you do to form a more holistic picture. If, for example, you do product development and some of your customers really want a certain feature, you could then enhance that hypothesis with insights from forums where maybe people talk about the problems they face. If you can tie these two things together, that should then also translate into your SEO strategy, for example, in the blog topics or the content that you cover, right? So I think tying all of that together, supported by more AI and automation tools in 25, makes for a really powerful approach to SEO and to marketing in general.
And you mentioned that your second step is to create massive amounts of baseline drafts for editorial content. So why massive amounts? And do you have any preferred AI tool to use for that?
The problem with mentioning tools is if I mention a couple, then I forget a whole load of other ones. But I think, you can probably approach this with ChatGPT, with any kind of extension for Google Sheets, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, any model really. You can also use kind of more SEO specific tools. AirOps, for example, has a really good integration. SEMrush has some really good tools. Systrix has a good kind of AI writer tool or a content analysis tool. So lots of different tools that can create the AI content for you. And the challenge that I want to put out there is to dare to create lots of amounts of AI content, but as a draft, right? Not as the final published product. Because what I see a lot of times is that companies are holding back by creating single content pieces. And so what I find much more fruitful is to say, okay, here's our keyword strategy and content strategy. Maybe we aim to go after, 30 really high quality content pieces this quarter. So instead of doing one by one, let's use an AI tool to create 30 drafts and then have our editors or writers build on top of these drafts, making it better and seeing what are the last, maybe 20% that make this piece really exceptional and maybe unique instead of this one by one kind of slow approach. And so essentially my take is I don't think companies are leaning as much into AI content as they could. And to safeguard the kind of hallucination or other risks that come with AI, you want to think about them more as a draft rather than the final piece of content.
And how do you select the draft that makes it forward to a final published piece of content? Because you can create hundreds of drafts, but I guess it's just a human pair of eyes that makes that final decision with regards to how to augment that content and what content is likely to appeal to your target user. And also in relation to that, is it here where you'd perhaps actually look at keyword phrases and volume of searches, or is it all about relevance to your target audience?
Yeah, great question. It's not the stage where I would look at, kind of topic coverage and keywords and phrases used. I actually also don't think that the best draft or worst draft is as important as just having a draft. And the way that I think about this is almost like, an artist who has a stack of clay, and then they look at that and they think, okay, this is what I can make out of the clay, right? This is the kind of statue that I can get to.
I'm picturing Ghost for some reason.
For example. And I think it's so much harder to start from zero, right? Because you have to outline and think and then iterate, blah, 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 blah. But if you already have a piece, even if it's not good yet, it's a much easier starting point, and there's much more inspiration that can come of it. And I haven't mentioned this in my tip, but obviously we want to bring as much experience and expertise into our content as possible. So if I am maybe a freelance lawyer or doctor who is supposed to create content for a company, it's much easier for me to start on top of the draft than starting from scratch. Also much more efficient for the company. And so that's where I'm coming from when I'm saying, drafts is just get to a decent starting point, and then all of a sudden the final version becomes a lot more visible, and you get a lot more ideas about what could make this piece of content really special.
Got you. I was still concerned that you're missing gaps in the market, because there are so many things that you could write about, obviously, as well. And AI, to a certain degree, is only going to base drafts upon what content exists already. So how do you ensure that you're not skating where the puck is, you're skating where the puck's going to be in terms of content?
Yeah. I think that's where the humans come in. There are probably like good kind of systematic approaches or automated approaches to get you there. But I think it's important to at some point, pass the content over from a machine to a human being who can then think about all of the gaps, who can think about, okay, what else could make this really good? And that's, again, I think that's where it matters if you have specialists on staff or not, who know the industry and the topic inside out, and who understand what's quote unquote cutting edge in this industry and what other angles need to be added. An example could be, let's just talk about health because it's such a sensitive topic. And let's just say you're writing about the pros and cons of a new drug, say a weight loss drug, right? The AI can write, I think, a pretty decent draft based on what's already out there. But you as a doctor or a pharmacist or whatever other specialist you are, only you can bring a unique angle to the content based on your experience, and maybe make people aware of some things that are more based on your hands-on experience in the industry rather than what the AI can infer based on its training data. So that's why I think it's so critical to pass it over to a human who can spot the gaps, but also the things that make the content unique.
Your third step is to enhance aggregator content programmatically. What does that mean?
That's a lot of words. It's actually not a lot of words, but it's
a lot of big words.
Yeah, a lot of big words. And so what I mean here is, okay, first of all, aggregators, right? Aggregators are sites that can scale content programmatically through user-generated content or an inventory. So we're talking about marketplaces, review sites, or large retailers. And programmatic content enhancements essentially mean, what are pieces of content or insights that I can add to all the pages at scale instead of a one-by-one approach? The opposite would be scaling content through a blog, right? Where every article is unique. But on an aggregator, let's just stick with TripAdvisor, you have maybe millions of pages for hotels around the world, or maybe restaurants. And so the idea of enhancing aggregator content programmatically, I think a really good example of that would be Amazon and their AI summaries of reviews. And that's kind of how you want to think about it. With all the data that we have, what are new insights that we can surface on every page? Or how can we use AI to summarize key insights and make the user experience better? Huge benefit from an SEO perspective, huge benefit from a user perspective. That's probably why SEO is so successful with this approach. But these kind of synergies or efficiencies that you can get based on the content you already have can make a huge difference. I'm going to give you another example, right? Redfin is a real estate site, essentially. You can find homes to buy, apartments to rent, etc. And a great job that Redfin has done is that they're giving you the price or the average price of apartments in a certain neighborhood based on their data. And they explicitly write that out on the pages. And that's a programmatic enhancement, right? It exists on all the city or neighborhood pages. It's coming from their data. And it's incredibly valuable because me as a customer, I of course want to see, hey, what's the average rent in this neighborhood? Or what does the average home sell for in this neighborhood? And that's what I'm talking about when I mean programmatic enhancements.
Got you. And is this approach suitable for every type of business?
Only if you have a lot of pages with the same template. So as mentioned earlier, right? If you're a so-called SEO aggregator, I wrote about this on my blog if in case people want to kind of look up the definition. For those businesses, it's most suitable. And then if you're not a marketplace or kind of like an inventory-driven site, a large retailer, then the question is there a suitable programmatic SEO play for your industry? So can you create a lot of templated pages for a keyword permutation? And if that's the case, then yes, absolutely, the door is open to you. But reality is it's not going to be a possibility for every business.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
A lot of SEOs get bogged down by busy work. A lot of that is manual. And so one exercise that I myself keep coming back to all the time is taking a step back and asking myself, okay, if I could only do one thing, what would it be? And it brings you closer to a highest impact item or project, but also the highest impact question a lot of times. So it could look like this, right? I'm getting bogged down by hard coding a lot of structured data into blog articles, right? And so that takes a lot of time. It's incredibly tedious. And so the kind of single high impact action that I could take is to step back and say, okay, can we kind of change the CMS or add a better CMS to our blog so that we can do these types of changes at scale? And so I think a lot of times SEOs kind of dig into a lot of like leg and busy work because it feels good and it feels like work. But I think the bigger question or the bigger kind of impact comes from raising these big questions that open the door to lots of changes and maybe lots of automated instead of manual changes.
Kevin Indig is a growth advisor. You can find him over at kevin-indig.com. Kevin, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thanks for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.